The ivory silk of my gown cascaded behind me, a river of moonlight down the endless aisle. Every step, a promise. This was my wedding day, a dream come true with Adrian, but some dreams, I learned, are merely elaborate stages for nightmares. That night, a secret so venomous unfurled, shattering my perfect world and redefining everything I thought I knew about love, friendship, and betrayal. Standing at the altar, the scent of white roses and old wood filled the air, mingling with the hushed anticipation of our loved ones. Sunlight, filtered through stained glass saints, painted shifting rainbows across the stone floor, illuminating Adrian's face as he watched me approach. My heart swelled, a tender ache of pure, unadulterated joy. His smile, a vision of warmth and devotion, was all I had ever dreamed of, a beacon promising a lifetime of happiness. He was handsome in his charcoal suit. His eyes, usually a playful hazel, now shimmering with a depth I mistook for profound love. This was it. The culmination of our whirlwind romance. The fairy tale I dared to believe in. Beside me, my maid of honor Lucille squeezed my hand reassuringly. Her own eyes, bright with what I thought was shared happiness, reflected the sparkle of the church's grand chandeliers. Lucille, my confidante since kindergarten, the sister I never had been an unwavering pillar through every dress fitting, every frantic planning session. "You look breathtaking, Soph," she'd whispered moments before, her voice thick with emotion. I'd believed her. Truly, the ceremony unfolded flawlessly, a beautiful dance of vows and blessings. Each word Adrian uttered felt like a sacred bond, tying our souls together. I saw our future stretching out before us, bathed in the same golden light that now poured through the church windows, a future of laughter, comfort, and unwavering companionship. Looking out at the sea of smiling faces, I spotted Adrian's mother Diane in the front pew. Her gaze met mine for a fleeting second. It wasn't warm, not exactly cold either, but rather appraising. A brief, almost imperceptible tightening around her lips. I dismissed it instantly, attributing it to the solemnity of the occasion or perhaps just her naturally reserved demeanor. After all, she had always been a woman of quiet gravitas. As we exchanged rings, the weight of the platinum band on my finger felt like destiny. Adrian's touch, as he held my hand, was firm and reassuring. Yet, even in that perfect moment, a tiny, fleeting flicker of his attention seemed to stray, his eyes darting towards the back of the church for the briefest fraction of a second, almost as if he was searching for something, or someone. The thought vanished as quickly as it came, drowned out by the soaring organ music and the sheer magnitude of my happiness. It was probably just nerves, I told myself. A natural reaction to such a monumental day. Everything was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Leaving the hallowed serenity of the church, we were swept into the dazzling energy of the reception hall. Laughter mingled with the clinking of champagne glasses, and the air thrummed with the joyous beat of our chosen band. My dress felt lighter now, twirling with me as Adrian led me through our first dance, his hand firm on my waist. For a few blissful hours I was truly adrift in the magic of it all. A glittering expanse of happiness, surrounded by everyone we loved, celebrating the beginning of our forever. I floated from table to table, exchanging hugs and grateful smiles, my heart so full it felt ready to burst. But as the evening wore on, a subtle shift began to ripple through my perfect bubble. I noticed Adrian's attention seemed to fray. Initially, it was just a fleeting glance at his watch. A quick, almost unconscious tap of his pocket where his phone resided. I brushed it off, attributing it to the adrenaline of the day, perhaps even a touch of exhaustion. Yet, the glances grew more frequent, his posture slightly stiffening, his eyes darting across the room even as he smiled and nodded at well-wishers. During a lull in the music, I caught him discreetly checking his phone under the table, his brow furrowed in a way that wasn't about wedding stress. "Everything all right, love?" I'd whispered, reaching for his hand. His fingers tensed briefly before relaxing, and he offered a quick, somewhat distracted smile. Just a work email, darling. Nothing important. Tonight is all about us. His words were reassuring, but his eyes told a different story. A distant, almost preoccupied glint had replaced the playful sparkle I adored. I tried to push down the tendrils of unease, reminding myself that he was a busy man, and our wedding day was bound to be overwhelming. This was our celebration, not a moment for baseless anxiety. Later, as I was making my way to the ladies' room, I found Diane standing alone by a grand marble pillar, observing the festivities with an almost analytical detachment. Her wineglass remained untouched. "Diane," I began, my voice cheerful, "aren't you enjoying the party?" Her gaze shifted to mine, devoid of the warmth one might expect from a mother-in-law on her son's wedding day. "It's quite lively," she stated, her tone flat, almost clinical, though I've always found excessive celebration to be a rather inefficient use of energy. She offered no further explanation, no congratulatory smile. Her eyes seemed to hold a hidden depth, a knowledge she wasn't sharing, and it sent an unexpected chill down my spine. The conversation ended as abruptly as it began, leaving me feeling vaguely unsettled, a dissonant note in the symphony of joy. The discomfort, however, paled in comparison to what came next. Barely an hour later, as the band was tuning up for another set, Adrian approached me with a strained expression. "Sophia," he said, his voice lower than usual, "I'm so sorry, but I have to leave for a bit. An urgent business matter has come up, something critical that needs my immediate attention. I tried to postpone it, but it simply can't wait." My stomach dropped. "On our wedding night? But tonight? Can't it wait until morning?" I pleaded, a knot forming in my throat. He took my hands, his grip surprisingly firm, his eyes conveying a regret that felt almost too practiced. "I wish it could, my love, but this directly impacts our future, our security. I'll be back as soon as I possibly can. Promise me you'll try to enjoy the rest of the reception." He gave my hands a quick squeeze, a fleeting kiss to my forehead, and then, before I could even formulate a proper protest, he was gone, disappearing through a side exit, leaving me standing alone amidst the revelry, confused, hurt, and utterly bewildered. The perfect dream had finally begun to crack. The driver, an extension of the night's unsettling formality, deposited me at the imposing gates of Adrian's ancestral villa. It loomed, a monstrous silhouette against the moonless sky, all sharp gables and towering chimneys, its ancient stone facade swallowed by climbing ivy. Even in the darkness, its opulence was palpable, grand, imposing, yet utterly devoid of warmth. I had seen photos, heard Adrian speak of its history, but standing before it now, the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum for forgotten dreams. A silent butler, as ancient-looking as the house itself, opened the enormous oak doors. His bow was deep, his expression unreadable, a silent sentinel ushering me into a chilling solitude. He led me through cavernous halls, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow me, and rooms filled with heavy, dark wood furniture shrouded in velvet. The air was thick, humid with the scent of aged leather, and something indefinable, almost melancholic, like a forgotten secret lingering in the air. Each footfall on the polished marble echoed, magnifying the profound silence that swallowed the last vestiges of the reception's joyous chaos, leaving only an echoing emptiness. My luxurious bridal suite was immense, a canopy bed like a throne in the center, windows looking out onto nothing but oppressive darkness. I felt like a character in a Gothic novel, a lost bride in a gilded cage. The initial awe at the grandeur quickly curdled into a crushing sense of isolation. Adrian hadn't even left a note. No message, no call, nothing. The grand illusion of our perfect day dissolved, revealing a stark, cold reality. A familiar cold dread began to creep in, chilling me more than the damp night air. I'd always prided myself on my resilience, on my ability to bounce back from life's minor disappointments, but this was different. This wasn't a minor setback. It was a gaping chasm. I thought back to my parents' acrimonious divorce when I was young. The way my father had simply times left asterisk, leaving a void that had taken years to fill. I'd built walls since then, learning to rely on myself, to guard my heart against the sudden, inexplicable departures of those I loved. Adrian, I believed, had chipped them away with his charm, his unwavering promises. Now, it felt like he hadn't chipped them away at all. He'd simply found a way to walk around them, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. Was this the pattern repeating itself? Was I always destined to be left behind, the last to know, the one in the dark? The thought was unbearable. My fingers, trembling slightly, fumbled for my phone. Adrian. I needed to hear his voice, to be reassured, to be told this was all a terrible misunderstanding. I dialed his number. It rang, once, twice, 3 times, before his smooth, confident voicemail message, recorded just last week, sounded like a cruel mockery. The subscriber you are trying to reach. I tried again, and again. Each unanswered call chipped away another piece of my rapidly crumbling composure. There was no urgent business that couldn't spare a 2-minute text or a quick call to his new wife on their wedding night. The excuse was a flimsy veil, barely concealing the bitter taste of neglect. I scrolled through my contacts, hovering over Lucille's name, then my mother's. My thumb hesitated. No, not yet. Not like this. How could I possibly explain this? My husband left me alone on our wedding night for urgent business? The words themselves felt humiliating. Absurd. It would confirm every fleeting doubt I had stifled, every cold glance I had dismissed. It would solidify the crack into a gaping, public wound, one that everyone would see. I couldn't admit defeat, not when the ink on our marriage certificate was barely dry. A different emotion began to simmer beneath the pain and confusion. A slow, building anger. This wasn't just about me being hurt. It was about me being dismissed, disrespected, and deliberately left in the dark. I wasn't some helpless damsel in distress. I wouldn't just wait passively for answers to be handed to me. Adrian had left a mystery, and I intended to solve it. My perfect dream had shattered, but I would not shatter with it. This lonely, opulent cage might hold secrets, but I was determined to find them. I didn't know how long I lay there, staring into the oppressive darkness of the bridal suite, the silence amplifying the frantic rhythm of my own heart. The grand villa, once a symbol of my marital future, now felt like a gilded tomb, its silence pressing down on me. But my determination, forged in the heat of confusion and betrayal, wouldn't let me rest. I would find the truth. Just as my eyelids began to feel heavy, a faint, almost imperceptible sound broke the solemn quiet. A hushed murmur, followed by a soft, rhythmic creak, like old floorboards protesting underfoot. My breath caught in my throat. Every nerve in my body instantly went rigid. I strained my ears, disbelieving, attributing it to the house settling, or the wind rattling ancient panes. But then, it came again, distinct voices, low and intimate, accompanied by the distinct scuff of movement. They weren't coming from outside. They were times inside, times the villa. A cold wave washed over me, a primal fear coiling in my gut. My first instinct, honed by years of guarding my vulnerable heart, was to pull the duvet over my head and pretend I hadn't heard, to embrace ignorance, to cling to the fragile remnants of my wedding day's illusion. But the memory of Adrian's hurried exit, his practiced regret, and the cold, appraising look in Diane's eyes, fanned the embers of my simmering anger. This wasn't just fear, it was a burning need to know. I wouldn't be left in the dark again. Not like this. Slowly, meticulously, I eased myself out of the massive bed. The cool marble floor sent a shiver up my bare spine, but I ignored it. I moved towards the door, each movement deliberate, my senses hyper-alert. The villa, which had felt so vast and imposing earlier, now seemed to shrink, its opulent corridors twisting into a labyrinth of unknown possibilities. The darkness was absolute, save for slivers of moonlight piercing through high arched windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like phantoms. The distant sigh of the wind outside mimicked the shallow, quick breaths I tried to suppress. My fingers, clammy with a mixture of dread and resolve, found the cold brass doorknob. I turned it with painstaking slowness, holding my breath as the latch clicked almost silently. Peeking out, the hallway was a long, dark tunnel stretching into oblivion. The hushed voices, now slightly clearer, seemed to emanate from somewhere on the ground floor, beneath my suite. They weren't loud enough to decipher words, but the cadence was unmistakable. Two people, in close conversation. I stepped out, placing each bare foot with exaggerated care, trying to anticipate where the ancient floorboards might creak. The air was thick with the scent of old wood, beeswax, and something else, a faint, lingering perfume, familiar yet unsettling in this context. The portraits lining the walls, usually intimidating in daylight, now seemed to watch me with judging eyes, their painted visages contorted by the shadows. Every rustle of my silk robe felt like a clap of thunder, every distant creak of the house magnified 100-fold. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging me forward, even as every fiber of my being screamed for retreat. This grand, unfamiliar house, meant to be my new home, had become a hunting ground for truths I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I crept down the sweeping main staircase, gripping the carved banister for support, each step a descent into an abyss of uncertainty. The voices grew marginally louder as I neared the ground floor, pulling me like an invisible thread. They were coming from the wing where Adrian had mentioned his mother's private study was located. A room I'd been implicitly warned not to enter, a sanctum of Diane's business affairs. Why would anyone be in there at this hour, and with Adrian not present? Reaching the ornate corridor, bathed in almost complete darkness, I saw it. A sliver of warm golden light spilling from beneath a heavy polished oak door. Diane's study. The voices were distinctly audible now, though still muffled. I could feel the vibrations of their hushed tones in the air. My legs felt like lead, my blood roaring in my ears. I paused, taking a shaky breath, pressing myself against the cold stone wall, debating one last time whether to turn back. What if it was nothing? What if I was overreacting, fueling my anxieties with unfounded suspicions? But then, another creak, a faint laugh, undeniably intimate, sealed my decision. I had to know. Inch by excruciating inch, I edged closer, my shadow stretching long and grotesque behind me. The door was ajar, a gap barely wide enough for a curious eye. My heart pounded so hard I feared they would hear it. I drew in a silent, shallow breath, held it, and peered through the opening. The soft glow of a single desk lamp illuminated the opulent room, and there, standing far too close, their backs mostly to me, were two figures. One, undeniably Adrian, his head bent towards the other. The second figure, slender, her silhouette instantly recognizable, her golden hair catching the lamp's glow like a wicked halo. Lucille. My best friend. My world tilted on its axis, and the first icy tendrils of betrayal began to coil around my heart. The world didn't just tilt, it imploded. Adrian's arm was possessively wrapped around Lucille's waist, his head bent, not in conversation, but in a kiss long, deliberate, undeniably intimate. My vision blurred. Not from tears, but from the sheer, violent rupture of everything I held true. Lucille, her eyes closed, leaned into him, her fingers splayed against his chest, her expression one of utter contentment. The golden light from the desk lamp seemed to mock me, illuminating their intertwined forms in sickening clarity. My breath hitched, caught in a vice of disbelief and horror. This wasn't a mistake, a drunken misstep. This was calculated, tender, and shockingly real. My body went rigid, a statue carved from ice. Every sound in the room, every hushed word, became unnaturally amplified, slicing through the buzzing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to smash the illusion, to tear down the walls of their deceit, but a cold, heavy numbness settled over me instead, freezing my vocal cords. It was as if my mind was frantically trying to catch up with what my eyes were seeing, unable to process the simultaneous betrayal from the two people closest to me. Then, Adrian spoke, his voice low, a smug satisfaction curdling my blood. "Soon, my darling. Once the legalities are sorted. Once Sophia officially transfers everything. The old woman suspects something, yes. But she has no proof. And Sophia, she's too trusting. Bless her innocent heart, always has been." He chuckled, a sound devoid of the warmth I had once loved. Lucille pulled back slightly, her gaze flicking up to his, a predatory glint in her eyes I had never, ever seen before. And my share? After all these years of playing the devoted best friend, of listening to her endless wedding woes, of helping her pick out that ridiculous dress, her voice, usually so melodic, was now sharp, laced with a chilling avarice. "I deserve more than just a cut, Adrian. I practically fed her every sentiment, every vulnerability, straight into your hands. You'll have more than enough, my dear," Adrian murmured, stroking her hair. "Enough to disappear and live like a queen. Sophia's inheritance, that trust fund she received upon her father's death, is substantial. Once she's married, after the initial period stipulated in the will, the entire sum is legally hers to manage, and with a little persuasion, it will be ours times to manage." He emphasized ours with a possessive squeeze of Lucille's arm. "You've been invaluable, Lucille. Her naivety truly is our greatest asset." A wave of nausea washed over me, a bitter bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a meticulously orchestrated heist. They weren't just lovers, they were conspirators, dissecting my life, my trust, my future, as if I were nothing more than a bank account. Every shared secret, every tear I'd shed on Lucille's shoulder, every whispered dream about Adrian, had been ammunition. The perfect wedding, the lavish reception, Adrian's rushed departure. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. He hadn't left for urgent business. He had left to finalize his wicked pact with my supposed best friend. My heart didn't just ache. It felt as if it had been ripped from my chest, torn into jagged pieces by their callous words. The pain was physical, a scorching burn that spread through my veins. Disbelief warred with a cold, righteous fury. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? The image of Lucille squeezing my hand at the altar, her voice thick with emotion, twisted my stomach. It wasn't shared happiness. It was triumphant deception. Adrian leaned in again, his lips brushing Lucille's ear. "Just a few more weeks of playing the doting husband, and our future is secured. Then, Sophia will be nothing but a distant memory, a minor inconvenience we cleverly bypassed." He laughed again, a low, guttural sound that echoed the hollowness in my soul. My body screamed for me to collapse, to shriek, to confront them in a torrent of pain and rage. But a strange, almost miraculous calm descended instead. It was a numbness, yes, but beneath it, something else simmered, a hard, glittering shard of resolve. They thought I was naive, easily dismissed. They thought I would be a minor inconvenience.
Oh.
They had no idea. The tears that threatened to fall were swallowed, replaced by a searing, incandescent anger that burned away the last vestiges of my shattered innocence. They would not see me break. They would not win. I began to retreat, moving with the agonizing slowness of a wounded animal, each step calculated to make no sound. The floorboards, which had creaked so loudly on my way here, now seemed to hold their breath with me. My hand, clammy and trembling, found the doorframe, guiding me back into the consuming darkness of the corridor. The scent of Lucille's perfume, once a familiar comfort, now felt like a toxic gas, clinging to my clothes, to my hair, to my very skin. I didn't allow myself another glance, another second, to witness their vile intimacy. I had seen enough, heard enough. My retreat was silent, a phantom in the night. The grand villa, once a symbol of opulence, now felt like a stage, and I, the unwitting star in their grotesque drama, I was no longer the heartbroken bride. I was an observer, a witness, and with every silent step back into the shadows, a plan began to form, cold and precise, in the desolate landscape of my shattered heart. They thought I was out of the picture. They were about to learn they had made a grave mistake. I reached my bridal suite, not with the quick, panicked retreat I might have expected, but with a deliberate, almost somnambulant pace, as if my body moved independently of the raw, screaming void where my heart had been. The massive door clicked shut behind me, plunging me into an oppressive darkness that felt less like night and more like a permanent eclipse of my soul. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't collapse onto the plush rug. I simply stood there, in the suffocating silence, allowing the enormity of what I had witnessed to finally crash over me. The betrayal was a dual blade, twisting deep. Adrian, the man I had just pledged my life to, a man whose every touch and word I had cherished as truth, was a charlatan, a thief. And Lucille, oh Lucille, her name tasted like ash. My confidant, my sister by choice, the one who knew every secret, every insecurity, every dream I had ever harbored. Her face, bathed in that sickening golden lamplight, so full of avarice, so devoid of the warmth I had mistaken for friendship, was an image that would forever be seared into my mind. I saw her hand, so often a comforting presence, splayed on Adrian's chest, a gesture of intimacy that felt like a desecration of every memory we shared. Flashes of our past, once cherished, now flickered, like malevolent spirits. Lucille, her arm around me at my father's funeral, whispering, "I'll always be here for you, Soph." Adrian, kneeling on one knee, his eyes shining with what I believed was adoration, asking me to be his wife. A picnic by the lake last summer. Lucille teasing me about my crush on Adrian, urging me to go for it. He's perfect for you. Every shared laugh, every late-night phone call, every tear I'd shed on her shoulder, now replayed as a monstrous mockery, a meticulously constructed performance to disarm me. The innocent bride in the church, the blissful woman at the reception, felt like a ghost from a past life, a naive fool led to slaughter. The pain was physical, a churning nausea in my gut, a suffocating weight on my chest that made each breath a struggle. My knees finally buckled, and I sank slowly to the floor, my silk gown pooling around me like a cold, accusing shroud. For a moment, the urge to simply shatter, to give in to the overwhelming grief and despair, was almost irresistible. I wanted to scream until my throat was raw, to weep until there were no tears left. But then, another image surfaced from the depths of my memory. My young self, watching my mother's heartbroken face after my father left, feeling utterly helpless, a victim of circumstances beyond her control. No. A fierce, defiant spark ignited within the numbing void. I would not be that girl again. I would not be a victim. They thought they had seen an innocent heart, an easily dismissed inconvenience. They were gravely mistaken. A different kind of fire began to spread through my veins, cold and precise. It was anger, yes, but it wasn't the wild, uncontrolled rage that would make me lash out blindly. This was a calculated fury, a diamond-hard resolve forged in the crucible of absolute betrayal. I lay there on the cold marble, not crying, but thinking. My father's will, the trust fund, the stipulation of marriage, Adrian's greed, Lucille's complicity, the old woman who suspected something, Diane, her cold, appraising glance. It all made a terrifying, coherent sense. This wasn't just a clandestine affair. It was an elaborate, cynical plot to steal my entire inheritance. I had to expose them. But not now, in the dead of night, where their lies could easily overpower my raw, emotional truth. I needed witnesses. I needed leverage. I needed to ensure their public humiliation was as complete and undeniable as their private treachery. My mind, which moments before had been a storm of pain, began to clear, focusing with chilling clarity on the logistics of my vengeance. The morning. That was it. The remaining wedding guests, many of whom were friends and family who had seen me exchange vows just hours before, would still be at the villa for breakfast. Adrian and Lucille, no doubt smug in their perceived victory, would be caught off guard, their guard down, ready to savor their betrayal. It would be public. It would be devastating. I imagined the scene, rehearsing it silently in the darkness. My entrance. Their faces, a mixture of feigned concern and thinly veiled impatience. My voice, calm, controlled, utterly devoid of the raw emotion that threatened to consume me. I couldn't break. I wouldn't. Every word had to be precise. Every accusation supported by the undeniable truth of what I had heard. I needed to present my case like a prosecutor, not a distraught bride. My pain would be my fuel, my anger my shield. I got up, my movements slow but steady. My reflection in the full-length mirror was a stranger. Eyes wide, shadowed, but with a glint of steel I hadn't known I possessed. The pristine white gown, still on a hanger, mocked me from the corner. It was no longer a symbol of purity or new beginnings, but a costume for a grotesque play. I would shed it. And with it, the naive, trusting Sophia they had tried to exploit. The rest of the night passed in a blur of agonizing stillness and meticulous planning. I thought about the evidence, the simple fact of hearing them. Diane's potential involvement, or at least her awareness, was a wild card. I couldn't count on her, but I would not let her stand in my way. My focus was on times them asterisk, on the public, undeniable truth. I wouldn't seek legal advice yet. The immediate need was to stop them in their tracks, to prevent the transfer Adrian had mentioned. My only recourse was a direct, public confrontation, leaving them no room to maneuver. I repeated the damning phrases they had uttered, committing them to memory. Sophia's inheritance, the trust fund. Her naivety, our greatest asset. Each word was a sharpened dagger, ready to be wielded. By the time the first sliver of dawn painted the sky a bruised purple, I was no longer a broken bride. The shattered fragments of my perfect world had been carefully collected, not to be rebuilt, but to be reforged into something hard, resilient, and utterly ruthless. The innocent heart they had dismissed was gone, replaced by a warrior's resolve. The perfect dream had died, but a new, formidable Sophia was about to be born, and her first act would be one of unforgiving truth. The bruised purple of dawn gave way to a brilliant, unforgiving morning. I rose from the cold marble floor where I had spent the night. The silk of my discarded gown a crumpled white heap in the corner, a stark reminder of the dream that had died. A quick, bracing shower washed away the stale scent of deceit, but not the residue of their words. I chose a simple, dark dress, practical, unadorned, a uniform for battle, not a celebration. My reflection in the mirror showed eyes that were still Sophia's, but colder, sharper, stripped of their former innocence. The warrior stared back, ready. The grand staircase, which I had crept down in stealth hours before, I now descended with deliberate, measured steps, each footfall a drumbeat of purpose. The villa, now illuminated by the harsh morning light, held none of the gothic mystery of the night. It simply felt like a stage, awaiting its final act. The lingering scent of old wood and beeswax was now subtly overlaid with the faint, cloying perfume of Lucille, a detail that sharpened my resolve. The morning room was a tableau of polite discomfort. A few lingering wedding guests, mostly distant relatives and business associates who hadn't managed to leave the previous night, picked at croissants and sipped coffee, their conversations hushed, clearly affected by Adrian's abrupt absence. Whispers about urgent business and poor Sophia floated in the air like a sickly sweet haze, and there they were. Adrian, looking impeccably disheveled, a calculated hint of exhaustion in his eyes, trying to play the part of the devoted groom who had returned from a crisis. Lucille sat beside him, nursing a cup of tea. Her head slightly bowed, a picture of demure sympathy. Their hands, however, were not touching. There was a nervous energy between them, a subtle tension that only someone who knew their secret would detect. A brief, furtive glance passed between them. A silent communication I now understood perfectly. Asterisk. Is she okay? Did she suspect anything? Asterisk. Their eyes darted up as I entered. Adrian's face registered surprise, then a flicker of forced relief. He quickly composed himself into a weary, apologetic smile. Lucille's eyes widened, a momentary flash of something akin to fear, before she quickly composed herself into a mask of innocent concern, her mouth shaping a silent, sympathetic, "Oh, Sophia." I offered no smile, no greeting. My gaze swept over them, taking in every detail of their feigned composure, before landing on Adrian, then Lucille, holding their nervous eyes just long enough for the unspoken accusation to register. A quiet murmur spread through the room as all eyes turned to me. The unexpected bride. My voice, when I spoke, was steady, clear, almost unnaturally calm, utterly devoid of the tremor that still lurked in my chest. "Good morning," I began, my voice cutting through the polite murmur. Adrian quickly rose, a practiced look of concern on his face. "Sophia, darling? There you are. I was just about to come check on you. I'm so terribly sorry about last night, that urgent business." I cut him off, my voice unwavering. Not a single note of emotion betraying the tempest raging within. "There was no urgent business, Adrian. At least, not the kind you described." His face blanched. Lucille choked on her tea, her hand flying to her mouth, her carefully constructed tears suddenly forgotten. The room went utterly silent. Every fork poised in mid-air, every gaze now fixed intently on me. "Last night," I continued, my gaze unwavering as it swept across the stunned faces, "I found my husband, Adrian, in the study of this very house, not attending to urgent business, but in the arms of my maid of honor, Lucille." A collective gasp erupted. A crystal cup clattered to the floor, shattering the oppressive silence. Shocked whispers, a sudden chorus of disbelief and outrage, filled the void. Old Mr. Henderson, a distant cousin of Adrian's, spluttered into his coffee. Mrs. Albright, a family friend, covered her mouth with a trembling hand, her eyes wide with horror. "An affair," I clarified, my voice gaining a chilling edge of precision. That was not merely a betrayal of marriage vows or friendship. It was a calculated part of a far more sinister plot. A plot to steal my inheritance, my father's trust fund, which, as Adrian so eloquently put it last night, would be legally mine to manage after a certain period of marriage, and then ours to manage with a little persuasion. Adrian's face was a mask of furious disbelief. Then panic, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Sophia, what are you saying? You're distraught. You're clearly not well. This is insanity." He took a step towards me, his hand outstretched, as if to calm a hysterical woman. Lucille, tears suddenly welling in her eyes with astonishing speed, jumped up. "Sophia, how times could times you? After everything we've been through, this is a cruel joke, a terrible misunderstanding." She turned to the stunned guests, her voice trembling with what she clearly hoped would pass for righteous indignation. "She's clearly overwhelmed, everyone. The stress of the wedding, Adrian's absence, she's imagining things." Her performance was almost convincing, a testament to her years of practice. I watched their frantic attempts to deny and deflect, a hollow amusement curling in my gut. They thought me a fool. They were about to learn their grave error. "Overwhelmed? Perhaps," I conceded, allowing a sliver of my true pain to color my voice, just enough to make my next words sting more. "Imagining things? No, Lucille." I heard every word, my gaze fixed on her, unwavering. "Your discussion about my share for feeding her every sentiment, every vulnerability, straight into your hands. Adrian's smug remarks about my naivety being our greatest asset. Your plan for me to be nothing but a distant memory, a minor inconvenience cleverly bypassed. Each phrase, recalled with chilling precision, struck them like a physical blow. Adrian's jaw clenched, his eyes now wide with undisguised fear, looking as if he'd been slapped. Lucille's carefully constructed tears froze on her cheeks, her face now a sickening shade of white, her mouth agape. The truth, delivered calmly and unequivocally, had stripped them bare. The room vibrated with the collective outrage of the guests. Faces contorted in disgust, whispers turned to furious condemnation. "Good heavens!" an elderly aunt gasped. "Such deceit!" another exclaimed. The illusion of the perfect wedding, the perfect couple, had shattered into a million pieces. "I assure you," I concluded, my voice rising slightly, cutting through the din, "I am perfectly well, and I recall every detail of their venomous secret." I looked directly at Adrian and Lucille, my eyes like ice. "Your little play is over," my declaration hung in the air. A final, chilling note that silenced the room more effectively than any shouted command. Adrian and Lucille, stripped bare by the truth, stood frozen, their faces a ghastly mosaic of terror and disbelief. The stunned guests, initially murmuring with outrage, now watched with bated breath, their eyes darting between me and the exposed couple, awaiting the inevitable explosion. Adrian was the first to regain some semblance of composure, a desperate, frantic scramble to salvage his crumbling deception. "Mother, this is preposterous," he stammered, turning to Diane, who had remained, until this moment, an impassive observer in the corner. "Sophia is clearly delusional. She's fabricating these wild accusations. You know how unstable she can be, how prone to dramatic episodes." "Enough, Adrian." Diane's voice, though quiet, cut through his frantic bluster with the sharpness of a diamond. It wasn't a question, or even a request, but an absolute command. Every head snapped towards her. She stepped forward, her regal posture unwavering, her gaze, usually so reserved, now fixed on her son with an intensity that made even him flinch. There was no warmth, no maternal concern in her eyes, only a cold, steely disappointment. My heart pounded, unsure if she would turn on me, if her enigmatic coldness was about to reveal itself as complicity. But then, her eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw not appraisal, but a flicker of something akin to understanding, even a faint, almost imperceptible nod of approval. My breath caught. "Sophia is not delusional," Diane stated, her voice resonating with an unexpected authority. "Nor is she fabricating anything. Every word she has uttered is, regrettably, true." A collective gasp swept through the room, louder, more profound than any before. Adrian visibly staggered, as if physically struck. Lucille, who had been attempting to melt into the wallpaper, now looked utterly trapped. "I have known of Adrian's mercenary nature for some time now," Diane continued, her voice imbued with a weariness that suggested a long, silent battle. "His attempts to gain control of the family assets, to manipulate those around him for financial gain, are not new to me. This latest scheme, involving Sophia's inheritance, was simply his most brazen." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "And Lucille, sadly, has been his willing accomplice, instrumental in this elaborate charade." My mind reeled. The mother-in-law, whose coldness I had attributed to dislike, to an intrinsic severity, had been watching, waiting. Her appraising glance was not judgmental but protective. Her silence, not indifference, but vigilance. "But how?" Adrian spluttered, his voice cracking, his carefully constructed persona utterly shattered. You couldn't have known." Diane allowed herself a small, mirthless smile. "Oh, Adrian, did you truly believe your mother, a woman who has managed this family's finances for 40 years, was so easily deceived? Your little urgent business trips, Your sudden interest in Sophia's trust fund details? The unusual pattern of communications between you and Miss Dupont. She shook her head, a gesture of profound disdain. You underestimate me, my son, and you profoundly underestimated Sophia's intelligence. She turned to a waiting butler, who silently handed her a leather-bound folder. From it, she produced a series of documents. Over the past few months, she explained, her voice now crisp and precise, I have been quietly gathering evidence, bank statements showing irregular transfers to an offshore account linked to Lucille, registered under a shell corporation, recorded phone calls detailing their plans for Sophia's inheritance. I had suspected Adrian was being monitored by a rival business, so I installed surveillance on his work phone, which he foolishly used for personal matters, and an amended copy of my late husband's will, specifically restipulating the terms of inheritance to prevent any financial manipulation, ensuring that Sophia's trust fund remains solely her legal property, regardless of marital status, and with no clauses for transfer without her direct and explicit consent. Reviewed by my own legal team. She held up a final document, a grim flourish. Furthermore, as of this morning, having witnessed enough of your depravity, Adrian, I have initiated proceedings to formally disinherit you from any and all family assets. You will receive nothing, not a penny. The words struck Adrian like a thunderbolt. He crumpled, his knees seeming to give way, a desperate, animalistic cry escaping his lips. No, mother, please. You can't. This is my birthright. I made a mistake. I can explain. There is nothing to explain, Adrian. Diane cut him off, her face a mask of iron. Your greed consumed you, your lack of character, your blatant disregard for human decency and trust has finally sealed your fate. You chose your path, now, you will walk it. Her gaze flickered to Lucille, whose face was now utterly devoid of color, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. And as for you, Miss Dupont, I believe the authorities will be very interested in your involvement in this attempted fraud. I have already contacted them. They are on their way. Lucille let out a strangled whimper, a raw sound of pure despair. The carefully constructed world of Adrian and Lucille, built on lies and betrayal, collapsed around them in a spectacular public fashion. The guests erupted into a fresh wave of outrage, their earlier shock replaced by disgust and anger. Some began to shout at Adrian, others at Lucille, their accusations sharp and unforgiving. I stood there, amidst the chaos, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. Vindication, yes, a deep, satisfying tremor that ran through my very core, but also a profound sense of awe, and a curious, unexpected warmth towards Diane. Her initial coldness, which I had so misjudged, was in fact a shield, a silent promise of protection. She had been my unlikely guardian, an unseen ally in a battle I hadn't even known I was fighting. In that moment, as the morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the wreckage of my supposed perfect day, I realized I was not alone, and the connection I felt with Diane, born from the ashes of betrayal, felt strangely more genuine, more substantial, than any bond I had ever shared with Adrian or Lucille. The ensuing hours were a blur of flashing lights, stern faces in uniform, and the relentless click of cameras. Diane's swift, decisive actions had set in motion an unstoppable cascade. Adrian, once so poised and arrogant, was led away in handcuffs, his furious protests and desperate pleas falling on deaf ears. His face, contorted in impotent rage, locked onto mine for a split second, a chilling promise of future hatred, but it was quickly swallowed by the crowd. Lucille, in a state of near collapse, was escorted out shortly after, her sobs echoing faintly as she was taken into custody for her complicity in the attempted fraud. The sheer, brutal finality of it all was overwhelming. The villa, once a stage for their deception, became a crime scene, then an empty shell. As the remaining guests dispersed, their stunned whispers carried on the morning breeze. The headlines exploded. A brutal public dissection of my shattered wedding. Bride exposes groom, and maid of honor, in shocking betrayal and inheritance plot, screamed one. Wedding day fraud, millionaire groom disinherited, blared another. My face, caught in a bewildered moment at the reception, was plastered everywhere, alongside the mugshots of Adrian and a tear-streaked Lucille. Friends, distant relatives, and even strangers I'd never met called, texted, or emailed. Their messages a mix of sympathy, outrage, and morbid curiosity. The scandal was immense, a juicy morsel for the tabloids, turning my private heartbreak into a national spectacle. Diane, true to her word, spared no expense in ensuring justice was served. Her legal team worked relentlessly, compiling the undeniable evidence she had so meticulously gathered. Adrian faced charges of attempted fraud and various other financial improprieties that Diane's investigation had unearthed, leading to a rapid and humiliating downfall. His family, already weary of his manipulative tendencies, disowned him publicly, stripping him of any remaining semblance of status. Lucille, too, faced the full force of the law. Her bank accounts, linked to Adrian's offshore dealings, were frozen, and she was implicated in the fraud. Her reputation irrevocably ruined. The social ostracization was immediate and brutal. Former friends turned their backs, disgusted by her calculated deceit. Their lives, built on lies and greed, collapsed entirely, leaving them with nothing but the bitter taste of consequence. In the immediate aftermath, a profound, almost dizzying sense of vindication filled me. Every time a headline confirmed their ruin, every time a news report detailed their mounting legal woes, a cold satisfaction spread through me. They had been exposed. They were suffering. They were paying the price. It was everything I had wished for in those dark, planning hours before dawn. The injustice had been righted, the scales balanced, but as the days bled into weeks, the initial surge of satisfaction began to wane, replaced by a growing, hollow emptiness. The exhaustion was bone deep, a weariness that permeated my very soul. The public spectacle, while serving a purpose, had also stripped me of my privacy, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. Every sympathetic glance, every well-meaning inquiry, felt like a fresh reminder of the gaping wound in my life. The grand villa, now silent and echoing, felt like a monument to my lost innocence. I realized then that justice, while vital, was not a magical balm. It didn't erase the ache in my chest, didn't mend the shattered pieces of my trust, or bring back the naive, hopeful girl who had believed in fairy tales. The betrayal had not only taken my past but had cast a long, cynical shadow over my future. The world, once a place of vibrant possibility, now seemed riddled with hidden traps and veiled deceits. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a stark, desolate landscape. The satisfaction of their downfall felt fleeting, ephemeral, a sugar rush that quickly faded, leaving me craving something more profound, something that would truly heal the lacerations on my spirit. I was safe, my inheritance secure, my tormentors punished, yet I felt more lost, more adrift, than ever before. The battle was won, but the war within me had just begun. The public storm eventually subsided, leaving behind a silence that was far more deafening than any headline, and a vacuum where my future once lay. I understood then that justice was merely a preamble. The true work of reconstruction had just begun. My first act was retreat, a desperate need to escape the echoing grandiosity of the villa, and the incessant gaze of a world that now saw me only as a victim. I found solace in a small, quiet apartment, far from the whispers and the pity. A space I could truly call my own, stripped of any memory of Adrian or Lucille. Here, away from the opulence and the trauma, I sought to simply be asterisk. The initial days were a blur of numb exhaustion. Sleep offered little respite. Haunted by replays of their insidious plot, I'd wake with a jolt, the scent of Lucille's perfume still clinging to my phantom memory. Food tasted like ash. My reflection showed a woman I barely recognized, hollow-eyed and fragile, But beneath the weariness, the warrior's resolve, forged that dawn, still flickered. I knew I couldn't stay submerged in that despair. I began with the small, deliberate acts of self-care, long, scalding baths, walks through unfamiliar parks where no one knew my name, the quiet comfort of a book that transported me far from my own reality. It was slow, excruciatingly slow, but each small step was an act of defiance against the forces that sought to break me. My therapist, Dr. Evans, a kind woman with discerning eyes, became my anchor. Initially, I was guarded, reluctant to dissect the raw wounds, but her gentle persistence slowly chipped away at my defenses. She helped me understand that my trust, my capacity to love, were not weaknesses, but strengths that had been exploited. The naivety wasn't a flaw in times me asterisk, but a predatory trait in times them asterisk. We explored the deep-seated fear of abandonment rooted in my parents' divorce, and how Adrian's sudden departure had triggered that primal wound. Learning to differentiate between healthy vulnerability and foolish blindness became a key lesson. And I began to see that guarding my heart didn't mean closing it off entirely, but learning to discern who truly deserved its contents. Letting go of the anger proved to be a more complex, arduous journey. The initial satisfaction of their downfall had long since dissolved, leaving only a bitter residue that poisoned my own peace. I found myself replaying their conversations, imagining what should times have said, could times have done differently. Dr. Evans explained that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I needed to forgive them, not for their sake, but for my own liberation. It wasn't about condoning their actions, but about releasing the emotional shackles that bound me to their destructive energy. It was a conscious, daily choice, a quiet act of mental alchemy, slowly transforming the searing rage into a duller, manageable ache, and eventually, a quiet indifference. In this period of introspection, I also began to rediscover forgotten parts of myself. I unearthed my old paintbrushes, long abandoned after college, and found solace in the vibrant chaos of colors on a canvas. I started hiking again, the rhythm of my feet on the earth a grounding meditation, the vastness of nature reminding me of the world beyond my pain. I took a cooking class, delighting in the creation of something beautiful and nourishing from simple ingredients. Each new stroke of paint, each ascent of a hill, each perfectly seasoned dish, that was a small victory, a testament to a self that existed independently of the trauma. I wasn't just times surviving asterisk. I was actively times rebuilding asterisk, brick by emotional brick. There were still bad days, of course, days when the memories ambushed me, when doubt whispered its insidious lies. Healing, I learned, was not a linear ascent but a winding path, fraught with detours and setbacks. It wasn't about erasing the scars, but about learning to live with them, to understand that they were not marks of shame, but symbols of resilience. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transmuted. It was no longer a destructive force, but a quiet reservoir of strength, a profound understanding of myself and the true nature of human connection. The naive bride was truly gone, but in her place stood a woman profoundly changed, profoundly stronger, ready to face whatever lay ahead, no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had bravely reclaimed. The quiet rhythm of my new life unfolded with an almost meditative grace. 6 months had passed since the brutal dawn in Adrian's villa. Each day a deliberate step away from the ghost of my past. Each moment a reclamation of self. My small apartment, with its sun-drenched windows and shelves lined with new canvases, was a sanctuary. A world away from the echoing grandeur I had once mistakenly thought was my destiny. I found joy in simple rituals. The first sip of morning coffee, the focused stroke of a paintbrush, the quiet camaraderie of a book club I'd recently joined. My scars remained, certainly, indelible reminders of betrayal, but they no longer festered. Instead, they had hardened, becoming a source of quiet strength, a compass guiding me towards genuine connection, warning me away from superficial charm. I was no longer merely surviving, I was thriving, cultivating a garden of inner peace from the ashes of my former life. It was at a small, independent art gallery, tucked away on a bustling side street, that I first saw him. I was lost in contemplation before a vibrant abstract, allowing its chaotic beauty to resonate with my own journey, when a voice, gentle and unassuming, broke through my reverie. Remarkable, isn't it? The artist really captured the feeling of controlled chaos. I turned, expecting a pretentious art critic, but instead met the kind, warm gaze of a man with thoughtful eyes and a genuine smile. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the flashy way Adrian had been, but there was an honesty in his face, a quiet strength that immediately put me at ease. He introduced himself as David, an architect, and we fell into an easy conversation about art, about life, about the hidden beauty in imperfection. There was no grand overture, no calculated charm, just a simple, unforced connection. He didn't ask about my past, didn't pry into my history, he just listened, truly listened, to my opinions on the art, offering his own with a respectful deference that was as refreshing as it was rare. Our relationship developed with a slow, deliberate grace, a stark contrast to the whirlwind romance I'd once mistaken for love. We started with coffee, then long walks through autumn leaves, discussing everything from urban planning to our favorite books. David was genuine, his words aligning perfectly with his actions. He was patient, understanding, never pushing, always giving me space, respecting the invisible walls I still instinctively maintained. I found myself sharing snippets of my life, the general outline of a difficult past, without revealing the traumatic specifics. He listened without judgment, offering quiet empathy rather than immediate solutions. He cherished authenticity, and his values mirrored my own, built on integrity and a quiet appreciation for the simple, profound joys of life. Yet, despite the undeniable comfort and growing affection, my guardedness remained, a phantom limb that still ached with phantom pain. I'd catch myself analyzing his every word, searching for hidden motives, for the subtle signs of manipulation that had been Adrian's signature. If he was late by 5 minutes, a tremor of old anxiety would prickle my skin. If he complimented me, a tiny voice of suspicion would whisper, asterisk, "Is this a ploy?" Asterisk. David, sensing my apprehension, never showed frustration. Instead, he would simply offer a reassuring smile, a gentle touch, or a quiet, understanding pause, giving me the time and space I needed to process. One evening, after I'd shared a particularly difficult memory from my childhood, I braced myself for pity or an attempt to fix it. Instead, he simply took my hand, looked into my eyes, and said, "Thank you for trusting me with that, Sophia. It means a lot." It was a small gesture, but it resonated with a profound depth that began to chip away at my deepest fears. 18 months after our first meeting, on a quiet evening by the lake, where we'd often shared our thoughts, David reached for my hand. The setting sun painted the water in hues of rose and gold, mirroring the warmth that had slowly, steadily filled my heart. There was no grand fanfare, no hidden photographers, no calculated display of wealth. He simply looked at me, his eyes brimming with a love that felt profoundly real, profoundly safe. "Sophia," he began, his voice a gentle whisper, "you have shown me what true strength and grace look like. You've taught me to appreciate genuine connection. I love you, not just for the woman you are today, but for every step you've taken to become her." He took a small, simple wooden box from his pocket. Inside it a sapphire ring, elegant and understated, reflecting the quiet depth of his love. "Will you build a future with me? A future built on trust, respect, and all the beautiful, messy, authentic moments life throws our way?" My heart swelled, not with the frantic joy of a fleeting dream, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty of true belonging. There was no artifice, no hidden agenda, only pure, unfiltered love. This time, I knew, this was real. 2 years melted away like snow in spring, Years filled with shared laughter, quiet comfort, and the profound healing rhythm of true partnership. The sapphire on my finger, a constant, gentle weight, symbolized not just a promise, but a testament to a love rebuilt, piece by painstaking piece. And then, one crisp autumn afternoon, under a canopy of ancient oaks whose leaves rustled like whispered blessings, I stood once again at an altar, but this was not the grand, imposing cathedral of my past. It was a quaint, sun-drenched garden, nestled beside a historic inn, fragrant with late-blooming jasmine, and the quiet anticipation of genuine joy. This time, there were no opulent chandeliers, no suffocating formality, just a circle of our closest friends and family, their faces alight with unfeigned happiness, reflecting the serene joy that now filled my heart. My gown, a simple ivory crepe, flowed with an understated elegance, unburdened by the weight of expectations. It wasn't about lavish display, but about pure, unadulterated connection. David stood before me. His eyes, so full of unwavering love and respect, were my sole focus. There was no fleeting glance, no distant preoccupation, only time's us asterisk. Our vows were not rehearsed pronouncements, but heartfelt promises, echoing the journey we had shared, acknowledging the scars we both carried, and affirming the profound beauty of choosing each other, authentically, every single day. My mother, tears of pure joy streaming down her face, clutched Diane's hand in the front row. Diane, no longer reserved, offered me a warm, genuine smile, a silent acknowledgement of the strength we had both found. This wedding was a celebration of resilience, a quiet symphony of love reclaimed. Just as the officiant prepared to declare us husband and wife, a subtle shift rippled through the gathered guests. A hush fell, a collective intake of breath. My eyes, still locked on David's, registered his momentary confusion before he subtly tightened his grip on my hand, his brows furrowing. I followed the direction of everyone's stunned gazes, my heart giving a single, unwelcome thump in my chest. Standing just beyond the perimeter of our intimate circle, a solitary figure emerged from the shadows of the ancient trees. Adrian, he looked different. Thinner, his usually immaculate suit rumpled, his once arrogant posture now slightly slumped. The confident glint in his hazel eyes had been replaced by a hollow desperation, a raw vulnerability I had never seen. Not even when Diane had exposed him. He was a ghost from a past life, a shadow attempting to creep back into the sunlight I had fought so hard to find. A wave of familiar dread, cold and sharp, threatened to rise, but I pushed it down, calling upon the strength I had so painstakingly cultivated. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes, bloodshot and pleading, fixed solely on me. "Sophia?" he rasped, his voice raw, barely audible. I just needed to see you, to say, I'm so sorry. For everything. For what I did. I was a fool. A greedy, selfish fool." His gaze flickered to David, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes, before returning to me. "I know I don't deserve it, but can you ever forgive me? Can you ever find it in your heart?" A tremor ran through the guests. David's grip on my hand was firm, protective, a silent question in his eyes. He was ready to shield me, to send Adrian away, but I shook my head. A slow, deliberate movement. This was my moment, my peace, my choice. I met Adrian's gaze. Not with hatred, not with anger, but with a profound, almost startling calm. The rage, the hurt, the confusion, all of it had been processed, dissected, and finally released. He was no longer the monster who had shattered my world. He was merely a man, broken by his own choices, seeking solace for his suffering. And I had found mine. "Adrian," I said, my voice clear and steady, reaching him across the short distance. "I forgave you a long time ago." My words were not a gift to him, but a declaration of my own liberation. Not for your sake, but for mine. Because holding on to that anger, that bitterness, was poisoning my own life. It was keeping me chained to a past I refused to let define me. His shoulders sagged, a glimmer of hope, quickly replaced by a deeper despair, crossing his face. So, there's a chance? For us? A small, sad smile touched my lips. There is no us, Adrian. There hasn't been for a very long time. What you see here, I gestured subtly to David beside me, to the circle of loving faces. This is my future. A future built on honesty, on respect, on genuine love. The life you tried to steal from me, the person you thought you could manipulate, they're both gone, and I am grateful for it, because your betrayal, as painful as it was, led me to this. My gaze met David's, filled with an unshakable certainty. It led me to true happiness. I turned back to Adrian, my voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. I wish you peace, Adrian. I truly do. But this chapter, with you, is closed. Permanently. Please, let us have our day. He stood there for a long moment, defeated, diminished, a stark contrast to the arrogant man I had once known. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, back into the shadows from which he had emerged, a final, fading echo of a nightmare I had conquered. The gasp from the guests was replaced by a collective sigh of relief, then a murmur of quiet admiration. David squeezed my hand again, his eyes filled with a pride and love that made my heart ache in the most beautiful way. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his concern a warm embrace. I leaned into him, a soft, confident smile gracing my lips. "More than all right," I replied, my voice tinged with the profound peace that had settled over me. "I'm ready." The officiant, his voice gentle and infused with renewed reverence, cleared his throat. Then, with the love we have witnessed and the strength that has brought us to this moment, "David, do you take Sophia to be your lawfully wedded wife?" His answer, "I do," resonated with a profound sincerity that brought tears to my eyes. And when it was my turn, my own "I do" was not just a promise but a testament to resilience, to healing, to the triumphant reclamation of a life that had almost been lost. This wedding, so different from the first, was not about dazzling the world, but about cherishing the genuine connection that truly mattered. It was a celebration of two souls, perfectly imperfect, choosing to walk forward, hand in hand, into a future built not on fairy tales, but on the bedrock of authentic, enduring love. The sun broke through the leaves, bathing us in a golden light that felt not like illusion, but like grace. Standing there, newly wed, gazing into David's eyes, I understood that this radiant peace was not a destination, but a milestone on a journey far grander than any wedding day could encompass. The golden light, now a gentle benediction, illuminated not just our shared joy, but the long, winding path I had walked to reach this profound sense of belonging. I had once believed happiness was a pristine, untouched meadow, stumbled upon by chance. Now I knew it was a garden painstakingly cultivated, watered with tears, and fortified by resilience. My journey began in the ruins of a perfect dream, shattered by the venom of betrayal. The young Sophia, who believed in fairy tales and unconditional trust, had died that night in Adrian's villa. Yet, in the desolate landscape left behind, a new self had begun to emerge. One forged in fire and tempered by truth. I wasn't just a survivor, I was a warrior, not against them, but for myself. The betrayal, agonizing as it was, had been a brutal catalyst, ripping away the illusions that shielded me from my own strength. It forced me to confront my deepest fears, of abandonment, of worthlessness, and in facing them, I had discovered an unshakable core I never knew existed. I often wondered, in quiet moments of reflection, what if it hadn't happened? What if Adrian had been the man he pretended to be, and Lucille, the friend I thought she was? Would I have truly known myself? Would I have understood the nuanced dance of trust and respect that forms the bedrock of genuine love? The answer, I knew with a certainty that transcended regret, was no. I would have lived a beautiful lie, forever dependent on external validation, never truly owning my power. The betrayal had taught me that superficial charm and grand gestures were hollow without integrity, and that true love wasn't about being swept off your feet, but about walking steadily, hand in hand, with someone who sees and cherishes your authentic self. David, with his quiet strength and unwavering kindness, had shown me that love wasn't a dazzling performance, but a comforting sanctuary built on mutual respect and profound understanding. My bond with Diane, too, blossomed in unexpected ways. She became not just a mother-in-law, but a fierce ally and a mentor. Her wisdom a steady guide through the complexities of navigating my reclaimed assets and rebuilding my professional life. She saw the fighter in me, long before I did, and her faith in my resilience was a silent, powerful affirmation. Our shared history, born from an initial misunderstanding and forged in the crucible of truth, transcended conventional family ties. Beyond the healing, beyond the love, I found new dimensions to my life. My art, once a forgotten hobby, flourished, becoming a vibrant expression of my inner world, a testament to beauty found in brokenness. I pursued further studies, not for ambition, but for the sheer joy of intellectual growth, expanding my horizons in ways I never imagined possible. I learned to embrace my vulnerability, understanding that it was not a weakness, but a gateway to deeper connection, and that self-love was the foundation upon which all other love could truly flourish. To anyone who has faced the crushing weight of betrayal, who feels lost in the ruins of a broken dream, I offer this truth. You are stronger than you know. The pain will feel insurmountable, the anger all-consuming, but within you lies an unyielding spirit capable of transformation. Do not let their actions define you. Do not let bitterness take root in your heart. Seek your truth, stand in your power, and reclaim your narrative. Surround yourself with those who honor your authenticity, and be relentlessly kind to yourself on the journey of healing. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning a new, more powerful chapter. The illusion of a perfect life had been spectacularly dismantled, only to reveal the far more profound and enduring beauty of a real one. My scars were a testament to my past, but my laughter, my art, and the unwavering love I shared with David were the vibrant brushstrokes of my future. I was Sophia, whole and complete, not despite what I had endured, but because of it. My life, once nearly stolen, was now truly, beautifully, magnificently my own, and in that I found a grace that illuminated every single day.